I audit around 5 to 6 Google Ads accounts every single week for e-commerce brands, and I see a whole bunch of mistakes that many of these brands make when it comes to Performance Max. And because those brands literally waste hundreds of thousands of dollars every single month making these mistakes, I want to make this video here with 5 to 6 points that are extremely important if you want to not only make the most money with your Google Ads Performance Max campaigns and scale them, but also save money along the way to make sure that you're not carrying too much waste. So with the account that we can see right here is one that I have audited lately, and of course everything is blurred, but this is a great example of an account that is making a ton of mistakes and therefore unnecessarily overspending with PMAX. So first and foremost, and I'm sure that's something that many of you are very, very aware of, you have to make sure that your PMAX campaign is not simply a pure brand machine. And no worries, we talk about other points in a second that are less common, but nonetheless, it's an important one. So if you look into your PMAX campaign, right, and if you look into the settings, then what you have to make sure of, and that's actually a mistake that this particular account here, this particular campaign isn't making, you want to check into the additional settings section right there, and you want to make sure that you have a brand exclusion list in place, okay? Now, this is not a negative keyword list. This is a brand exclusion list where you tell Google that you want to exclude your own brand and the URL associated with it from showing in this Performance Max campaign. Now, there are a few cases and a few reasons why you don't want that. And for a few of our clients, for example, we don't have a brand exclusion list in their PMAX campaign just because we still, segment and we still make sure that we are, not counting purely on the overall performance, but we are separating within PMAX. But in many cases, if you're not aware, you want to make sure that the brand exclusion list is in there. Otherwise, you are literally wasting a ton of money on your own brand. And especially if you have a separate brand campaign already, right? Then you're literally double or triple spending on brand, making it way more expensive than necessary. That's a big no-go. The second point we can actually see here right away, and that is actually an issue that this brand has, and this is automatically created assets. If you click into this section right there, you can see final URL and text assets being sort of ticked, okay? What this means, pretty straightforward. Google will be able to create text assets for you, and Google will be able to show on all URLs of your site. Again, there are a few times where you can consider putting those in place, at least the final URLs, right? Because sometimes it can be useful to, let's say, advertise your entire site, but then you have to make sure that you have negative placements in place so that Google cannot show everywhere. So for example, if you don't want to show people your blog or your policy pages or things like that, but especially on the text assets, there are very, very, very few cases where you want to have them enabled. And maybe you have received your own ads at some point in time when you were browsing Google and you were wondering, like, why does this headline look so weird? Why is the copy a little bit off, right? And that might be the exact reason, because Google has been auto creating some of these assets and usually they're not that great. On the text side of things, it's not crazily problematic, but in a second we will look at video and then it gets pretty crazy. All right, next up you have scaling. So you can see this graph right there, and that's a pretty strong downward trend, right? You see the conversion, the ROAS basically has been quite solid here, and this is a brand that needs a very high ROAS, so it's not that 7 is like amazing in this case, right? But the moment that this campaign has been scaled, as you can see right here, from 4K, 9K, 12K, etc., all of a sudden the ROAS really dropped. And that's a theme that you can experience, or that you typically experience with PMAX quite a lot. And the reason here is that the moment that you increase your spend, all other things being equal, right? Google all of a sudden spends a lot more money on the networks that you don't want it to spend the money. And that is specifically the Google Display Network, YouTube, all those push placements that are very profitable for Google because competition is a lot more limited when it comes to, those display, discovery and YouTube placements as opposed to shopping and search. So the first thing that Google does when you drastically increase the budget is to put all your money into those, for them at least, profitable networks. But that's why you often see this decline in ROAS when you are scaling, right? Now, what is the best way to combat that? Well, The thing is that you should ideally scale a bit more steadily. That doesn't mean that in some cases you can like 3x your budget overnight. Sometimes it does work, but in general, you should have a close eye on where Google is showing your campaigns, right? Which networks are involved? Are you showing primarily on shopping, right? When you look into, for example, your let me put this here. When you are, for example, looking into your products, which I don't want to click on right now because then I have to blur everything. But basically, when you click into products, you can, for example, compare how many clicks do you get for your products and how many conversions, and you can already estimate how much of your money goes into, products, shopping versus other networks. Or you can use, third-party scripts to get a better understanding of what's going on. But the point is, you want to make sure that when you're scaling, the money simply isn't blown into the display network, YouTube, and so on and so forth. That's something that I see all the time. Next up, let's look into asset groups, right? And here there are a whole bunch of mistakes, but I want to, focus on some of the most common ones that I see all the time. Number one is having just one gigantic asset groups focusing on everything. Now, this isn't the case right here, even though the asset groups could be improved a lot. But the point is that when you're running PMAX, unless you have a one product store or a handful of products or just literally one category or something like that, you need asset groups to account for different categories, subcategories, and so on and so forth, right? What I see all the time is one gigantic asset group. Everything is in there, a few random images, you have 10 categories in your store, but then you have 3 random images in your asset groups that you're using, or 3 different types of images, right? And it's just not that's very far from ideal, because if you do that, then you might as well just use a shopping only PMAX campaign, because you have a very high chance that those assets will do any good. The thing is, if you use assets for PMAX, then you of course want to also gain some sales from those assets, right? If you know that those assets will be unnecessary anyway and they won't do anything, then you might as well just run a shopping only Performance Max campaign. So just having one gigantic asset group is one big problem. Another big problem though is when you simply have a bunch of asset groups, but they are doing almost the same thing, right? So as you can see here, even though it's blurred, many of these asset groups use almost the same assets. They use almost the same audiences, as I can actually tell you, right? And if you do that, the thing is, PMAX will automatically go above and beyond your targeting anyway. So it does make sense to use asset groups that are fine-tuned by, or that are structured by, product category, product type, using different assets, using different audiences. That stuff makes sense. And we do this with a lot of our clients if we are using PMAX. We're definitely not using PMAX everywhere, okay? But if you do what most brands do, and that is just having a bunch of asset groups where you're primarily tweaking some brief audiences and you are reusing the same assets pretty much everywhere, then this is really, really bad, because you're artificially, tearing apart all the conversion volume that you have and putting it into multiple asset groups, even though those asset groups do not have a real point, because you're just duplicating many of those things, right? So if you have one asset group, there should be a good reason for it. And if you have multiple, you should make sure that they are as, unique as possible. Now, let's look into another issue that is very, very common, and I'm sure you've experienced that yourself. And that is, if you look into your assets right there, okay, you will probably notice when you have videos, or you will probably notice that you are showing videos even though you don't specifically, or you haven't specifically added a YouTube video to your PMAX campaign. And at that point in time, it's fairly common that people know about that, but I just want to make sure that I've said it here. If you do not add any video to your Performance Max campaign, then Google will create one for you. And those videos are typically pretty terrible. They're literally just a slideshow of some images. It looks super odd. So the thing is, if you run PMAX, ideally you have some decent video assets, but even if you don't, get some video done, right? Even if it's just a repurposed Facebook ad video, even if it's just, some very basic stuff. But if you don't add any, then Google will use its own. And trust me, they are worse than anything that you can possibly come up with. So make sure that you are using some sort of video that will already increase and improve your campaign just right there, okay? That is very important stuff, because that way you are not, throwing money at something that isn't actually working. And now the last point is actually something that applies to all your campaigns, but because it's so common in Performance Max as well, I thought that I will point this out here too. And this is making sure that you're focusing on one primary conversion, and that should ideally be purchases, okay? What you can see here is when you click on segment and then you click on conversions, conversion action, you will see the different conversion actions that are being used in the account right there. And I have seen many cases, even with high spenders spending $30, $50, $100,000 per month that I have audited, that were not focused on their one primary conversion. So you can see here local actions, directions, website visits, other engagements. It's fine to do those things and use them as like secondary conversions, right? Where you just want to measure them but not optimize for them. But the point is, if you have, for example, 3 purchase conversions, which I've seen, and you are running all of them as primary at the same time, or you have a purchase and an add to cart and a website visits, and all of them are being run as primary conversions, right? Not only will this completely mess up with your reporting, and you will think, oh, great, I've made, 2,000 conversions last week, but in reality, you made like 300. But also Google will optimize for the wrong things. If Google thinks that a website visit or a product view or an add to cart is one of your ultimate goals, then it doesn't distinguish between a purchase and that. Because if it's so easy to get like a website visit, right, and you count for it as an actual conversion, Google will think, well, great, website visit, easy to obtain. Let's give that brand like 2,000 website visits and we've done our job. So make sure, I know that's a beginner's thing, but make sure that you have one primary conversion. Ideally, that's purchase, or if you're not eCom, then it should be leads, but I guess most of your e-commerce brands, make sure that you just use one single primary conversion and that is purchase. That way you will optimize for the best things. So that were some of the most important issues that I see all the time. And if you now think, well, I'm not sure if there's probably something that I'm really doing wrong, or you just want to have a second pair of eyes, or maybe you think, hey, I've hit that invisible ceiling, I don't know how to scale further, I'm stuck at 30 or 50 or 100K per month, and you just want to take it to the next level, then check the link in the description to visit cartlift.co, my site where we help e-commerce brands scale using Google Ads, whether you spend $50, $100, or $200,000 per month. We have done it all. And if you are a brand ideally making more than $50,000 per month right now across all your channels, then I'm pretty sure that we can help you. We can do an audit for you first, discuss, some potential next steps, and then we can talk about whether it makes sense to work together. So I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that this sparked some ideas. Hopefully you will be able to reduce your PMAX waste that way. Let me know in the comments if you made any of these mistakes so far. And with that being said, leave a like, please subscribe for more Google Ads, PPC, e-commerce content, and I look forward to see you in the next video again. Thanks and bye-bye.